Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. Today's video around Solana, a couple of partnership pieces of information that have come out in the last few days. Very exciting, very interesting. And of course, what we'll do is a very brief introductory history lesson of Solana. We'll talk about Revolut a bit also as part of the partnership. And we'll talk as well about this whole foundation of banking moving into this crazy financial world where it's offering pretty much every service possible for us as end users. Before we do that, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, of course, to the video and both the channel respectively. Do let us know in the comments below in any of the videos if there's any projects you want me to cover. I will gladly do that as and when I get time, of course. But let's go straight into this topic. So for me, of course, Solana being one of the biggest narratives in crypto for quite a few years now. We'll talk about the milestones, the major milestones. And in fact, we can go to the very beginning. I think it was about 2017, I think, I became familiar with Anatoly. I don't think I interviewed Anatoly last year. I know some of the Solana team, and interviewing some of those guys last year was fantastic. Great experience. Great to meet them as well in person. So he was actually a former Qualcomm engineer, if I remember correctly. And yeah, that kind of makes sense because I think back then in 2017, blockchain was still phenomenal, of course, as a technology. It's still emerging, still growing. But it's maybe a bit slow compared to what we see today. So it kind of makes sense that people like Anatoly came in. It's not just him, obviously, but many others came in and progressed blockchain to that next level. So I guess his breakthrough was called that kind of like proof of history aspect. So a way for the nodes to agree on time, allowing the network to process thousands upon thousands of transactions per second. So even back then, I remember like being impressed about like 10,000, 20, 50,000, transactions per second being boasted on blockchain. Now it's a lot more higher, and the expectation is higher because the more and more things that we need transactions for, not just finance, but everything, a transfer and action related, we're going to need that scalability. We're going to need that network ability and capability, the capacity of it. So Solana, I think, launching 2020. If I can probably find some further history in here at some point. Look at these numbers just on here. And actually talking about that NFT is quite an interesting part to sort of kick off on, really, because I think around the 2021, that rise of Solana initially, which we'll look at in the chart from a price perspective, NFTs took off significantly, DeFi protocols were flooding in, Phantom Wallet was skyrocketing. The Sol token of Solana went from a few dollars, so I think it was like over $250 or something. But I think that's where Solana became known as, I guess, like the Visa of crypto, kind of. I think that's fair to say. That ability to have such a strong platform and showcase that. So everything kind of looked unstoppable until obviously the market crashed, and it wasn't just Solana, but I think there was around about a 95% reduction. We'll confirm that when we go in the charts. But the developers and the builders didn't leave. So there was, and ironically, actually, from my time with Paris Blockchain Week, it was really cool to learn about some of the like hackathons and things like that, and the developers, and a lot of the developers I was speaking to were using Solana in the background. And the first swing around of the event back in 2023, I do remember that Solana was trying to fix a lot of like network outages and things like that. But then also things like meme coins were coming out. It was going crazy right in the market. So I think Solana, at that point, around 2023 and 24, started becoming like the most used blockchain in the world. So it kind of just didn't recover from that flop of the market in general. And, there were some discrepancies around the network as well. But generally speaking, it came back stronger than ever. So we had the DeepIn migration. We had the Saga phone and the retail chain. We must talk about that because Solana became the preferred chain essentially for viral meme coins. I'm not a huge fan of meme coins, but I appreciate the philosophy around them. You had the retail traders getting heavily involved. The NFT activity was huge, as we mentioned before. And consumer-facing apps, the development of this area is always going to keep growing. The aspect of crypto is really interesting and fascinating, and definitely keep evolving, and instant payment elements to it as well. And then all of a sudden, institutional interest came in. So these sort of major funds, research firms, banks, etc., began noticing Solana, i.e., essentially the only non-Ethereum layer 1 with genuine and global adoption potential. And I think that's probably where the Revolut story begins to matter. So those that have or haven't seen it, the last few days, very interesting announcement around Solana and Revolut. Europe's financial giant meets the internet's financial infrastructure. Great title into that. So Revolut, just really quickly before we kind of talk about that interaction, because it is fascinating to see this being added and the ability for exchanging Solana within Revolut. It was founded in 2015, guys, right? It's absolutely gigantic. Fast forward to to where we are now with Revolut. I think they started off as a travel card, actually, like some kind of financial exchange app on a travel card, right? And evolved into essentially a full digital bank that we see today. So I think by 2020, it had like 15 million users. There were 0 fees on the exchange, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember my memory bank in my head here. I think it was doing things like stocks and insurance as well. There's a few other things that it did. But you fast forward to now, that 50 million is converted to over 40 million users. I don't know what the exact number is right now. It's like 40 million was one of the recent numbers I saw. But yeah, basically the numbers are huge, right? So operating in over 35 countries worldwide, it's one of the biggest of fintech apps out there. And what's really pleasing from my side of things, and I'm sure for you guys and those that do use Revolut and like crypto, fully regulated crypto gateway. That's a really critical point there. So it's one of the most important on-ramps for digital assets, essentially. So Revolut didn't compete with the banks. It's essentially replaced the experience of being inside one, and then that's ultimately converted to many onboarding users of banking in general and crypto as well. And of course, there's loads of various different incentives that people go into. So in general, we're watching right in front of our eyes the biggest transformation, I would say, in banking since the internet. I'm talking about the internet banking, the ability to go online and monitor your bank in general, your accounts, rather than having to go into branch, checking the cash machines, the ATMs. And most people didn't really kind of see it yet because, I guess for many, many years since the last few years, of course, have evolved this, but users wanted the speed. So, traditional banks were settling in days, fintech and crypto can do it in seconds. Users wanted digital first experiences. So I kind of felt like no one under 35 maybe walked into branches anymore. I guess I stopped doing that just after uni, maybe like 15 odd years ago, because that digital aspect came in. Users wanted control. They wanted the ability of, lack of paperwork, all these things, removing that nonsense and becoming the real revolution. So I guess the Revolut topic kicks in there. So the future of finance essentially will use things like real world assets, tokenized assets, instant cross-border settlements, the reduction in cost of that, all of those cool things. Probably AI agents, I think, will come more into play as well. And then things like the staking, possibly replacing the old traditional elements of saving accounts, things like that, smart contracts. I mean, that's a huge topic. I don't even think I've done a video on smart contracts individually, so I probably should do that. But switching back to this whole entire topic around Revolut and Solana, again, I mean, it's fees from 0%. It's so incentivizing to users, and the fact that it is such a strong bank now. You can buy, sell, hold, sell directly in the app. I think there's a native Solana deposit and withdrawal in there as well. You've got staking support. I think there's staking support. I need to look into that a bit more detail. But yeah, Solana becoming a mainstream financial rail. So Revolut can now use Solana as a global settlement layer instead of Swift if it really wanted to. Take note of that last point. because it's a huge topic I've been talking about for years. And I do think Swift is trying to panic a bit right now as to what it's going to do to evolve before it gets either taken over or integrated or, absorbed. Over 40 million Revolut users, whatever the number is, over 40 million, to get that frictionless access to Sol, or the opportunity to do so. So it opens up a huge market, even those that don't like crypto or know it, but they may have heard of Solana or things like Ethereum, etc., and it gets them excited. So you got fintech giving that user experience, significant user experience, crypto giving the infrastructure, and together they're disrupting the banking world, right? So the regulatory aspect is that you're taking on a very, very credible blockchain in Solana, and Revolut itself is heavily regulated. So in my opinion, it's not going to be the last, absolutely not, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first major digital bank integration with Solana natively. Someone may correct me if I'm wrong on that. So it's absolutely phenomenal to see this kind of pattern. And with the fact of how huge Revolut is, I think this partnership goes massively hand in hand. So when we think about this in a bit more detail, we can surely see a pattern, in my opinion, where whether it's traditional banks, I think you're just going to see more and more virtual banking systems or financial systems just really evolve their offerings to everyone, because this is what everyone wants. They want something that has everything they could possibly get within a service or a solution, right? So that aspect of the staking, the simplicity of holding, the ease and convenience of being able to operate within the exchange, not messing about with KYC and things like that all the time. I think for a user in Europe, not just here in the UK, or a supported region at least, who wants a no-fuss entry or small to medium allocation within Solana via Revolut and Sol, is definitely probably the most user-friendly option out there. I think it opens the market up significantly, and ultimately, as this progresses, as people get more interested and excited about it, you're going to get more people adopting Solana, or at least buying it as a retail investor to add to their portfolio, and thus, hence, you get to the point where the Solana price will eventually just keep increasing in price. So it's absolutely phenomenal to see this progression, first and foremost. And very much I'm interested to see how these two mergers, at exactly the moment the future of banking is accelerating towards crypto railing, plays out in these coming years. Do drop a comment below if you want a deep dive, by the way, on Solana. I haven't done one before. I know there's many out there. Whether you want my take on it or not, it's down to you guys, obviously. But, Revolut's future roadmap is huge. And I think there'll be a race. I think there'll be a bigger race occurring with these. I think you look at PayPal, now you can get a debit card and a credit card. No more virtual ones. You can still use the virtual cards, obviously, but they have the physical ones now, and Klarna are doing the same. And I'm sitting there going, look, they've done an incredible job of raising the awareness and bringing it all together for people. Because now I'm sitting there, with exceptional mortgages and things, I'm sitting there and going, what does my bank actually offer me? What does it do? It does nothing. It just holds my money. It creates interest off it. Essentially, the whole illusion of money just annoys me in general, right? And I don't like banks. We have to have them. But I feel like we're on the verge, really properly being able to have a decision to move it across to something that is hugely regulated. Let's say Revolut, for example. I'm not saying I'm going to go straight to Revolut. I'll do the more research on it all. But the fact that they got direct debits, credit cards, the ability to invest, the ability to on-ramp and off-ramp, the ability to do all these things in one place, whereas the banks are just so bloody slow. They're all closing down anyway. It's all going digital. It's forcing people to go down the virtual route of payment, contactless, etc. We've talked about it for years. And, eventually stablecoins, CBDCs, all of those, digital ID, basic universal income, all this kind of stuff, all integrated, all interlaced, AI, blockchain, IoT, it's all coming together. And I'm just impressed by the speed of all this. I thought it'd be done by 2030 for sure, but I didn't expect it all to be merging this fast ahead of time. So it's really super exciting for me. Forgive me if I'm waffling on here, but I just think it's really important to really emphasize the power mechanism, the ability that Revolut will have now moving forwards, as well as all the other things that it deals with in crypto. It's not just Solana, of course, but and vice versa. I think it's another great addition to the system of Revolut. I mean, you can see on the picture here, there's so many different assets that it already works with. We're talking about Solana here because it is an absolute powerhouse for sure. And it's got great credibility of how well it's done over the last few years, as to why this might be exciting. So we revert this really as a whole topic as to go, well, what can we expect from a price movement? Well, we haven't really seen anything from the last few days because we're in such a downward trend of the markets in general. This is not Solana's fault. This is not directed at Solana individually. The market is in a bear cycle at this moment in time. I'm waiting for the bounce back. But on the other side of the coin, I'm expecting to see potential opportunities here for DCAs. Now, you might think I'm mad. I probably am. I don't hold Solana in my portfolio. I don't even think I did years ago either. I missed the train. I didn't get involved. Perhaps I probably should around here. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? But when I saw, as I mentioned earlier, the developers, some of them were staying behind. There was a bit of controversy with a few things. There was things going on in the market in general, and cryptos, some fraudulent activities were going on, right? I think even FTX and all that kind of stuff was kicking off. So it was a bit of a doom and gloom area here for me to go, well, I've got enough assets in my portfolio. Do I really want to be adding Solana? Well, obviously it shot up to 207. It shot up to 297, I think, at some point. So we talked about earlier, apologies, I think I said 250 or over 250. It was actually more nearer to 300 in some instances, depending on what exchange or viewpoints you look at from chart analysis perspective. But you see from the previous charts here, I'm actually going to try and pull some across because we've got one of the lower regions. In fact, that should be a bit further down because of the real low point. This is where it gets really interesting in my opinion. I'm going to pull across this one because it's maybe one of the medium areas. Apologies. This shows you how old this chart might be when I first got into it, because I changed the chart lines to these ones that are like over here, not these colorful things. But what I've done here is basically taken the low point, the highest point, or what, at least two or three of the areas, a really critical area, but that way, by the way, it just can't seem to get the support at that 257 level properly, bar maybe a couple of days interaction there. I'm just going to pull this one across as best I can. In fact, I'm going to delete that one because it's not really much point in this. This is now giving us, and as I said, these are from ages ago, it's now giving us a definition to the longevity of Solana, where we could anticipate options to come in and see where it may get to. Now, it's going to need a lot of money to flow into, irrespective of the excitements the last few days. It's still not been enough to pull it all the way up here somewhere. It's going to need a lot of money to break that support of 257 again and stay above it. Because when you get into that area, and what I mean by that is, let's say we take the top level here and one of the most recent low points, you'll see some staggered elements here of how we could potentially get to that $400 mark one day. It may or may not happen, but I can also, it's not too far off. Bear in mind with fib levels, guys, it's not fully accurate. However, you can see some relativity here. And what I mean by that is you can pretty much see that these three are half very much in alignment to an extent, bar about $10. Okay, so we got a few confirmations where we've looked at long-term levels, we've looked at medium ones, and we've looked at some more short terms, and they're still coming out with similar outcomes as target prices. So I'm just going to go roughly in the middle of all of those. Just used completely the wrong chart there. I'm going to go between just around the middle of those as a top point, and I'm going to come back down to one of the most recent highest points that we saw. What was this? September 2025. So you can see here, this is what we would need to do when we get to this area. So first of all, let's talk about down here. I do think these are interesting DCA, dollar cost averaging areas to input. Not financial advice, but if I'm going into Solana personally, it's a pricey asset per unit for sure. I'd be thinking about it hard, but could it do what like maybe Ethereum did all those years ago? I mean, I was buying Ethereum at $75 and I think I sold it for like 2,000 or something. I only had like a few of them at the beginning, but it set me on my trajectory to invest in other assets and build up my portfolio without having to put my own, in inverted brackets, money into the equation. So you've got this element here. We've had a bounce back in April 2025. We haven't really had a full one since. So it's had a really good support level at 125. Now there's an argument to say across this line here, there's an opportunity at 116, or maybe just floating above that $100 or maybe slightly below it. So I'm squaring those areas in for a future video just in case. That is an opportunity where if that fails, these are the two likelihood areas that we're probably going to see unless it absolutely completely flops, which I very much doubt because I think there's a lot of value in Solana and there's a lot of development going on. I'd be very surprised if we flop back down here unless it was a completely dead market again, like we get the winter cycle, right? So that aside, we now look at the upward trajectory and you can see it takes its time to get to these next levels. So for example, here, April 2025, got to it roughly around May. So that's about a month, another month or two to drop down. This staggered approach took from June to September, about 3 or 4 months, right? So again, a few months to come back down. That's where we are today. So we got to think logically that if we want to get back up to this 260 mark, it might take a few months unless there's some considerable changes in the macro events, i.e. things like interest rates, inflation, wars, all the other nonsense that goes on right in the world, that we have to think about in the market movement mindset. I think that has to clear a lot more for us to be in a more positive mood, to us to be able to facilitate more money to influence the markets a bit more, i.e. invest more. So that aside, and with what we talked about, the partnership with Revolut, that's definitely a possibility. And I could imagine Solana getting to these higher price points again in the near future for sure. So there's some staggered approaches where we're perhaps potentially taking profits depending on how many you're buying of Solana. This may be not as effective at these points. You may be interested actually maybe in that double area or something a bit higher for a longer term. Do I think that we would get to 400 next year? It's always possible, but I'd be with a cautious element in the sense as you look at this huge area between 400 and 257. It's only $150 and many assets out there have done that quite quickly. You could argue $30 to 250 in such a short years and a half-ish space could easily be taking us from here to up there because the percentage ratio is pretty much the same in terms of its increase in percentages. So there's definitely a possibility, but before we do that, we have to hit all these elements here. So I think this is a big ask. It's a big task in the sense there's a lot of money in Solana already. We have to maybe a bit more patient on this. But from its current price point, just to reflect the RSIs down here, they're good buy points. I always look at that 40 mark to around 42 to 35. If it gets any lower than those numbers, obviously that's even more of an opportunity, but also measuring the risk of what kind of cycle we're actually in, because it could be getting lower, and that's why we do the DCA methodology. So that aside, performance indicators on the right hand side it's still in negative. I think that's been dragging itself down more and more, as has the rest of the market. But Solana has a huge advantage in the sense that it's got credibility, it's got history, it's got data, it's got great partnerships, it's got great utility. Look how many projects and companies are building on this thing, and how many banks, or call them like maybe the newer banks, are getting involved and having the adoption of Solana, whether it be infrastructure or just listing, is obviously a different topic. But the fact is, there's still a relation to it, right? It can only be as a future of excitement, in my opinion, of Solana. So we're gonna wrap that up there, guys. Thank you for watching. Do let us know in the comments below your thoughts on Solana. Have you been holding? How long for? What's your excitement about Solana? What are you worried about? Let's look at this again. I'm going to keep an eye on it because I think it's absolutely fascinating to see these continuous mergers with the new financial world, the new way of banking. It's super exciting. It's coming quicker than I ever thought it would. Let's keep an eye on it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next Sol video. Take care. Bye-bye.